Hello everyone. Yes, it's Dr. Horowitz, and yes, we have reached our end of our course, and there are just a couple of remarks I'd like to share with you as you complete your activities and move on to other challenges, other learnings, other issues that you will be confronting, perhaps you are now, in the area of communication, and particularly within the workplace. We begin our course with a kind of a history or an evolution of how managers thought about communication in terms of productivity and maximizing employer productivity. And we saw during those phases how a lot more interest and understanding of what motivates people to do a good job, what motivates people to follow leaders, and ultimately what motivates them to maximize their performance, both as individuals and as members of a team. And we kind of summarized, perhaps, the classical beginnings which highlighted how managers looked at employees simply as objects, if you will, and to be programmed and to work as efficiently and as quickly and hopefully producing the highest quality in the shortest period of time. And we saw that that could work perhaps in the short run, but over time we found that the impact on individual motivation, individual health, safety, self-esteem tended to get lower to the point where there was a high degree of turnover regardless of whether or not they were adequately paid or assured of a job. That through the evolution of psychology in particular, that it was discovered that individuals aren't simply motivated by tangible or monetary rewards, but rather much more long-lasting was to reward an individual for internal or intrinsic rewards due to what was perceived as recognition of having value to the organization and an increase in their self-esteem, the ability to work independently, be creative, and reach what we have called self-actualization on the Maslow scale of human needs. Then we kind of switched gears a little bit, because with that context, which was important for us to have, so that you as potential leaders, which I look at all of you as, would have that history in place, knowing that as you enter or move further along your career, particularly into leadership positions, and particularly in today's very diverse environment, both nationally and internationally, that you would be prepared with skills that would fit the current approach to communicating and motivating employees. And that best, I thought, was captured by the systems theory approach to organizational management. And again, without reviewing that whole concept, just this idea of recognizing that everything is in fact interconnected, and the workplace, people don't operate in vacuums. And if they do operate in vacuums, chances are they are not going to be able to supply one another with necessary resources in order to accomplish goals that have been set by the organization. And I challenge you, I think, to recognize yourself as a possible systems-oriented leader, therefore, and particularly as we began our discussions centered around culture, how people get to have the values that they have. Where do these come from? And they're not simply about what country you may come from and the kinds of customs and values that a country holds, but maybe more powerfully, the values and beliefs all of us gain from what we have come to know as cultural programming. These are the day-to-day beliefs that we've acquired and often we bring to the workplace and can often be in competition with those who have cultural programming values that are highly different than our own. And that brought us to that whole issue of conflict, which is the module I chose to end our course on by introducing you to what I have found to be perhaps one of the most innovative strategies for addressing that whole issue of when cultures collide, when values collide, and particularly when they appear incompatible. Because the price is very high, or the stakes are very high, if conflict remains unresolved. Or where you have situations where you have decisions being made unilaterally without sufficient input, without feedback, and generally speaking, when you have that kind of decision making or resolution of conflict by one individual, you end up with something we call a win-lose situation. Somebody wins and somebody loses. But in real life, when somebody loses, they don't spend their time simply getting on board with the winner. Chances are, more likely, as you saw in some of those video scenarios, those persons who feel left out, who particularly if they felt dominated, tend to react in a negative manner and often simply do what we call minimum daily requirement. Just enough work to keep a job, and beyond that, even the possibility of sabotaging the work of the organization, which, as we would come to realize in systems theory, makes the whole system out of balance and can very likely lead to the disintegration and lack of survival of the system itself. In between that, we worked on some very specific skills, because having an overview or an approach, while really important to have, because it's the cornerstone of how you move and how you proceed and how you interact, it was necessary to learn specialized skills to become a superb communicator. And so we did. We looked at that. We learned about how do you create messages that are effective. We looked at the communication process itself. We learned to look at our audiences as being different than ourselves, analyzing them for their own beliefs or communication styles, if you will, and recognizing we don't communicate with everybody in the same way and by using the same language. So good leadership is not so much about equality, it's about being fair. Employees must perceive on an individual level that they are in fact being treated fairly, with respect, and that their own fundamental interests in particular are being accommodated. So I kind of tend to articulate leadership as something that is never mandated, but rather persuaded by the leader, so that those who follow the leader intrinsically want and know that that leader sees them as an individual. That's very important, and it's most important in the times we live in. I want to leave you with this challenge and full awareness that, in particularly, not just in the world, but in our universe and in our country has never been as divided as it is today. Culturally, politically, economically, we are in a time that is crying out for leaders to step forward, not simply to argue on behalf of their own perception and position about how things ought to be, but more in line with how a leader uses their intelligence, their values, their communication skills, their knowledge of style and psychology to bring these cultures together. And it's very fitting that they look at new ways to do that. And I believe that interest-based approach probably offers the most exciting and viable way that I have seen in my career. So if my experiences and some of our activities have helped you to reach that awareness, then I would say I'm very pleased on a personal level. I also want to commend you tremendously for the reflections that you showed in your discussion boards and how you interacted so civilly, speaking about coming together, and you did it with elegance and eloquence, and each of you learned and exchanged ideas that may have been different from one another, but added to the body of knowledge so necessary for us to interact effectively and achieve our personal and professional goals. With that, we've all got a future to attend to. We've all got a destiny. Destiny is like a jealous lover, doesn't like to be kept waiting. So I wish all of you the very best as you move on to what I expect to be a very positive, very effective, and very successful future.